So it's great to be together. We're busy with our series, This is Jesus, and we've essentially taking the four Gospels and we're exploring Jesus from these four different perspectives. And while we're journeying through this series, what we've done is we went to the book of Ezekiel. And if you look at these four images behind the title slide here, you'll see that there's four different images that we brought up. There's four different pictures that we're working with. It's the picture of a lion, and you guys can bring it up when you're ready, but it's these different pictures, the picture of a lion, the picture of a man, the picture of an eagle, and then the picture of an oxen. And these four different images comes from Ezekiel chapter 1. And today we're going to look at the first one of the four. So the first one of the four is the Lion of Judah. And the guy writing about the Lion of Judah, which is the first slide, is Matthew in his gospel. So we're going to look at Matthew's gospel. Now, if you thought we were going to work through the whole of Matthew's gospel, all 28 chapters today, you were wrong. I'm sorry. We are not going to go through 28 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew in the next 20 minutes. I know you're disappointed. You were hoping we'd do that. There is no way we're going to do it. What I'm going to try and do today is I'm going to give you some keys. I'm going to give you a tool on how to read the Gospel of Matthew. So forever, from this day onwards, hopefully, every time somebody says, I'm reading from Matthew so-and-so, you're going to think back of this, okay? So who was Matthew that was writing the message? Here's the thing. The messenger is, you cannot separate the messenger from the message. The messenger is woven into the message. Whoever God gives a message to communicate, he gives that message to a particular messenger, and part of the message is the messenger. So when we're reading the Gospel of Matthew, part of what we need to understand in the Gospel of Matthew is we've got to understand that Matthew is part of the message, part of the perspective, part of these four views on who Jesus is that God is speaking about. So who was Matthew? Now, Matthew writes to the Jews, and when he writes, he's writing about the fact that the wait is over. Jesus is the one they've been waiting for. And Matthew writes about the fact that Jesus is the one that they've been waiting for. And when he writes about that, he's writing to people that were waiting for Jesus. Now, I don't see anybody with a physical Bible in here. Everybody's got digital Bibles. There we go. Okay, Vicky, you win. You've got the physical Bible in the room. Good job. Well, So there's a physical Bible in here. I know some of you have got physical Bibles, but if you had a physical Bible and you were to turn to the end of Malachi, the end of the Old Testament, and you would turn over and you'll have a little page that says New Testament, and then you'll turn over and you'll probably get the book of Matthew. Between those two pages, there's 400 years of silence. And we just page over from Old Testament to New Testament as if it's a moment. It wasn't a moment. It was 400 years of nothing. Not a prophet, not a notable writing, not a single thing that was included in your Bible. 400 years of silence. And in these 400 years of silence, Matthew gave up on God. Matthew gave up on the coming Messiah. He gave up on the promise of God. He gave up on the idea. Matthew would give up on the entire idea. And when you read the Gospel of Matthew, you'd never think that, right? Because he starts off with the genealogy and he tells the Jews how Jesus is the one, right? He displays it in different ways. He shows Jesus is the one. Jesus is the reason. Jesus is the fulfillment of prophecy. The entire book of Matthew is looking back at these prophecies and saying, hey, Jesus is the one. But he never introduces himself up to chapter 9. It's in Matthew chapter 9 that the author, Matthew, actually introduces himself as the one that is writing this book. And we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 9 from verse 9. And this is what it says. It says, and Jesus passed on from there. It's important where he's passing on from. We'll get back to that in a second. But it says, as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office. You could read this and just go, Matthew sat at the tax office. So what? Who cares that Matthew sat at the tax office? What's the big deal? But I want to tell you, this is one of the most important sentences in the entire book of Matthew. Because this is Matthew, the messenger, setting up where he's at. He's saying, hey, guys, I was Matthew sitting at the tax office. Now, tax office, what does that mean? Well, this is what it means, right? When Matthew's sitting at the tax office, it means that he's sitting at the Roman tax office. So the Israelites, the Jews, were a nation of their own. They were an independent nation, and this independent nation was taken over by the Romans. And when the Romans came along, they didn't just take over the Israelites, but they killed them. They got rid of every bit of rebellion, and then they set some tax collectors up. But the tax collectors had to be people that knew the Jews. So they were looking for some of the Jews to work with them in collecting the taxes. They were looking for some collaborators that would partner with them in oppressing these people. So they would invite some Jews in, and they'd say, you're going to work with us, right? Would you come over to us and do this work? And the way that it would work is when they would hire a tax collector, they wouldn't give them a piece of paper saying, this is the taxes, you're going to pay this percentage or that percentage. And if you're dumb enough to live outside of Texas, you're even going to pay a state income tax, and it's all of that. There wasn't a list. There wasn't a law. This is how it worked, right? They simply went and they said, you want to be a tax collector? No problem. You pay us this much. What you charge them is up to you. So the tax collector could make up the tax whatever they wanted to make the tax to be. So they would exhort their people, make huge amounts of money to their people, and just pay a flat rate back to the Roman government. The Jews hated these guys. Now I know it's similar in American history, but I didn't study American history when I was growing up. The one thing that I've learned about American history is that the English is not the favorite people in American history, okay? So a tea party in the States is not a good idea. So my kids have taught me, okay? So there's a reason why we drink our tea cold. It's part of the rebellion against the English, okay? That's why we drink cold tea in Texas, right? Because we will not bow to them and their tyranny. But the fact is that we, thinking of that time when we were oppressed by another nation, the idea of some of our own turning around and working with them was just wrong. I remember growing up, and South Africa was an English colony, and the English also overtook it. And then I learned in history about these people, these South Africans, that would work with them. We had a name for them, okay? And I'm going to teach you the name. We called them hensoppers, okay? Now, I know that makes no sense to you whatsoever, but what it was is directly translated, it says hands uppers. We called them hands uppers, right? Those who just put their hands up in the air and they gave up the fight. That's who Matthew was. Matthew was one of those that I despised growing up, thinking, how could you work with the enemy? How could you work against your own people and work with the enemy? That's exactly what Matthew did. When Matthew writes this sentence, as Jesus passed along from there, he saw a man, Matthew, sitting at the tax office. Every single Jew reading that sentence knew exactly what he meant. He said, that's a collaborator. That's one that's given up on his faith. He's given up on the waiting for the Messiah. He's given up on his hope. He's given up on the plan. And he is just one with his hands up in the air going, let it be what'll be. Let happen what will happen. Matthew gave up on Jesus. He was not waiting for Jesus. In fact, he gave up on the promise of the Messiah. Now, here's the thing. We never decide to give up all at once. None of us goes and says, you know what, I'm going to give up on my marriage. You don't wake up one morning and go, oh, I'm no longer going to build this marriage. I'm just going to let it fall apart. No, how we give up in life mostly is small little steps. None of us gives up on the dream God gave you, or the call God gave you, or the vision God gave you. None of us give up on the idea of trusting God for our income in a moment. No, we don't give up in a moment. We don't make a decision, and I'm sure it was the same for Matthew. He didn't just one day wake up and say, oh, I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up on God and his promise. No, I bet the way it worked was that he was just kind of doing his life, and then he realized, oh, maybe I need a job. And maybe I'll find a job with the Romans. And maybe he made a friend with a Roman, and the Roman said, hey, could you help me with this one thing? And then he said, okay, let me help you with this one thing. And then he helps with the one thing, and then one thing leads to another, and another thing leads to another, and another thing leads to another. And then Matthew sat at the tax office. See, in life, we sometimes mess up, but we don't mess up all at once. It's small steps. It's little bits and pieces. We don't give up on our marriage or start an extramarital affair overnight. No, these things don't just happen, and we don't decide for them to happen, but it's little steps, one little bit at a time. And before you know it, you find yourself in a place where you don't know what to do next. You don't know where to go next. You find yourself so deep in it. You've made some choices, and you find yourself in a place where you've got buyer's regret. Have you guys ever heard of buyer's regret? It's when you purchase something and you were very excited about getting that something, but when you got it, you realize what you got wasn't what you wanted. No, just me. Okay, I know what that is all about, right? That happens to all of us. Sometimes in life, we get what we were after, and what we got wasn't what we were looking for. And when I look at Matthew's story, that's exactly where he's at. He finds himself at this place where he got what he wanted, but what he wanted wasn't what he needed. It isn't all it's cracked up to be. And I believe that I'm speaking to some people today that are having buyer's regret about their own lives and about their own decisions, that are finding themselves in a space in life, in a career in life, in a moment in life where you feel like you're stuck in a space. But you're stuck in your tax office, you're stuck in your circle, you're stuck in your decision, you're stuck in that place where you've now found yourself, but this isn't what God has called you for. This isn't where He wants you. And you've given up on God, and you've given up on His promises, and you've given up on His ideas over you in your life. And you find yourself there. The timing of Matthew introducing himself to the story is very significant. And I want to read it to you from Matthew chapter 9. And if we go to Matthew chapter 9 and we kind of scroll up to verse 1 of Matthew chapter 9, what you'll see there is it says, "So he got into the boat, crossed over, and came to his own city. And then behold, they brought to him a paralytic laying on a bed. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, 'Son, be of good cheer, your sins are forgiven you.'" And then it goes on to say how the scribes are upset about him blaspheming, and how could he do this? How could he say this? And then we pick up the story in verse 6 again, and it says, "And then he said to the paralytic, 'Arise, take up your bed and go to your house.' And he arose and departed to his house. Now, when the multitude saw it, they marveled and glorified God, who had given such power to men." As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office. It's interesting, the timing, the moment that Matthew writes in his own story. So Matthew didn't know the story up until here, but he heard the story as others told the story about how this moment, this instance in time is the moment when Matthew realizes that what he's given up on, what he's let go of, what he's given over on, what he's surrendered to, that wasn't what he wanted, wasn't worth it. That moment was written into the book of Matthew in the time and space where people were marveling about what? The words of Jesus. No. The fullness of Jesus. No. They were marveling about what? They were marveling about the power of Jesus. See, and I think this is so true about where we find ourselves. I think people have grown dull with religion. People are sick and tired of just going through the religious exercises and another process and another story and another hoop we've got to jump through. And that is not what Jesus was about. Jesus didn't come to set up hoops for us to jump through to connect to God. Jesus came so that we might live in the power of forgiveness, in the fullness of who God is. And it's when Matthew gave up on something. What he gave up on was what the scribes and the Pharisees were teaching. He gave up on a religious system, and he said, "That's not for me. That's never going to work. That's never going to get me where I'm supposed to get." And then when he gives up on that, what happens is when he gives up on that, he sees Jesus, and Jesus didn't come with smart words or another bunch of hoops. What did Jesus come with? He came with power. He came with a demonstration of the power and the fullness of God. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 2 to 5. Paul writes this. He says, "For I determined not to know anything amongst you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I was with you in weakness and fear and much trembling, and my speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words of human wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power. That your faith should not be in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. And I read this to you today as Paul's words, but I want to tell you it might be Paul's words, but it's my prayer. I read this as Paul's words, but my prayer. This is my prayer for us as a congregation. May 512 City Church not be about persuasive words, but may 512 City Church be about the demonstration of the Spirit and of the power of God. Because I want to tell you, whether you're here in the room, whether you're in the Zoom room, whether you're on the Facebook chat, or whether you're on the YouTube chat, however you're a part of this today, whether you're watching it live or watching it later or not watching it at all, we all need the power of God. We all need a demonstration of the fullness of God, and that's what we're trusting God for. Is may we not be a place of another bunch of smart words. May this not just be a religious exercise. The church globally has been shaken to its core. I mean, I was just thinking about it this week as we were preparing for kids ministry with Oscar, and we were having a conversation. And as we were talking about the kids ministry in the next season, I was just reminded that right now in our city, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of kids that used to partake of kids ministry every Sunday for the last 7 months, most of them have had no kids ministry whatsoever. What is that 7 months of investment that's missing? What does that do to a generation? And I want to tell you, we need to pick up. Why? Because they need the words? No, they don't need some more words. They don't need a religious exercise. They don't need a religious rhythm where every Sunday they go to church. But what they do need is a personal encounter with Jesus Christ. And if we're facilitating that, and they're coming and they're partaking of that, then that's great. If we're not facilitating that, then it's a good thing that we're closed down. But we've got to facilitate moments. We've got to make room for people to engage God. We've got to get the power and the message of Jesus Christ out there. So whether we need to do it online, whether we need to do it in Zoom, or whether we need to do it on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Twitch, whatever else you want to put us on, we will keep spreading the word so that people might have an encounter with the living God. What happened that day in Matthew's life changed his life. What happened that day for Matthew would completely change him around. In fact, if you go, what you'll see is this is what happens. Verse 9, right? We read this a moment ago. Verse 9 says, and Jesus passed on from there. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office. And he said to him, follow me. The most powerful words Jesus ever said. And I want to tell you, he repeats it again and again. And he says it to you today. He said, follow me. And when he said, follow me, he arose. Matthew arose. His whole life changed and he followed him. And then it says in verse 10, now it happened as Jesus saw at the as Jesus sat at the table in his house, that behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and sat down with him and his disciples. It's such a simple little verse, but remember who's writing here. This is Matthew writing. What's Matthew saying? He says, I arose and I followed him. And then it says, and many tax collectors and sinners came and sat with him. Who were those tax collectors and sinners that sat at Matthew's house? They were tax collectors and sinners just like Matthew that were friends with Matthew. And when Matthew made this decision, what happened? All these tax collectors and sinners said, well, if he'd go to Matthew's house, I'll go to his house. You know what? When we speak of Matthew, we speak of Matthew the tax collector. Have you ever spoken about him like that? Have you ever heard someone say, yes, Matthew the tax collector? When they describe the different disciples, they say, and this one was Matthew the tax collector. It's great. That's how we refer to him. But I did a study in the early church, and I went back and I looked at in the early church, how did they refer to Matthew? Can I tell you that every single place you read about Matthew in the writings for the first couple of 100 years after he lived, every one of those spaces calls him Matthew the evangelist. Because I want to tell you, when tax collectors realize that Jesus comes, and even when we give up on God, He hasn't given up on you, and you realize that He still believes in you, He's still coming after you, He's still looking for you, and even though you might have given up on life, or given up on the dreams God gave you, or you gave up on the fullness He has in mind for you, or you gave up on this whole religious exercise, may you know today that He has not given up on you. And when tax collectors realize that He hasn't given up on you, you know that He hasn't given up on anybody else either. Tax collectors makes the best type of evangelists. And may we not be known as Jurie the tax collector, but may we be known as Jurie the evangelist. Jurie the tax collector that was so glad to be lost, and then I was found, that I can't help but tell everybody about it. 512 City Church, God placed you at that tax desk. He placed you in that bank. He placed you in that company. He placed you in that street. He placed you in that community. He placed you at that school with a reason, so that you might be the evangelist He has in mind for you to be. That is His desire for you. That is His hope for you. There was that moment when Matthew looked up and his whole life changed. See, Matthew looked up to people, and it's interesting if you go and study Matthew's history and you actually look at how he would meticulously write down the story of Jesus, it's clear that Matthew knew the scriptures really well. So he must have studied under some scribe or Pharisee for a long time. And when he saw Jesus, he gave up on all of that. He gave up on all of his schooling. He gave up on the scribes. He gave up on the Pharisees. And he said, I don't want what they have. I'll rather sell my soul to the Roman government. But then there's this contrast in the story between the tax collectors and the Pharisees. And the tax collectors are the ones that gave up. And the Pharisees feel like, well, we're the ones holding true. But if you look at Jesus' ministry, he had a clear bent. And I saw this video that was made, and it's kind of a combination of versions in Luke and a version in Matthew brought together into one story about Jesus' life. And I thought it was such a powerful depiction of what happened that day. And I want to invite you to watch this with me. Next. All taxes must be paid in full! Take it away!
We're all Jews. How can they live with themselves? Our own people working for Rome. These people make me sick.
Collaborators. Let's move on.
They're stinking vermin. You should keep your distance from them.
2 men went to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, and the other one a tax collector. The Pharisee prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men. Thieves, adulterers, or this tax collector. But the tax collector didn't even look up to heaven. He said, God, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. God bless the tax collector, not the Pharisee. Anyone who praises himself will be humbled. And anyone who humbles himself will be praised.
Matthew, come.
See? Now he even calls the sinners to follow him. One has to wonder of the sins committed by his other followers.
You can find yourself in one of three places this morning. Either you're finding yourself in the place of the tax collector where you're saying, you know what? It's just gone wrong. It's just been hard. I've just made small little steps, and before I knew it, I was far away from where I really wanted to be. And you could have a humble heart before God, crying out, say, God, I need you. Lord, I need you to take care of me. I need you to look out for me. Or you could find yourself today in the place of the Pharisee, where you might be going, hey, it's all good. Got it all down. Done my little religious hoops. I've jumped through them all. Maybe you're in a good space. Maybe you're at that place where you're sitting around the table and you're inviting your fellow tax collectors and sinners to come and sit around with you, and you've made the transition from a sinner to a saint, and you're saying, you know what, I've been forgiven much, and I cannot help but tell everyone about this. That's great. But if you're not there, if you're in a space today where you're saying, you know what, I'm still sitting at the tax office, I haven't responded to his call, I haven't responded to his voice saying, follow me, then I want to tell you, today is your day. This is your moment. This is your Matthew moment, where you get to take back that which you've given up on. And as I was preparing and praying for today, I particularly felt that like there's people around that have given up on some dreams. You've given up on some things that you knew God has called you to, but it's just too impossible right now. I want to tell you, the Holy Spirit is ready to come right now there where you are and just awaken that once again. Melissa Benson, I don't see your face, but I see your name on here. I want to tell you that God is going to use you in this season, and He's going to awaken some things that He's placed inside of you. He's going to come and release some words that He's given you. And I want to tell you that your prophetic gift is welcome in this church. And God's going to open up doors for you to share words with people that'll change them and that will adjust them. Mike, I see you on the call as well. And I want to tell you, I'm so aware of the fact that God has put a call upon your life. And I want to tell you, your legacy is far greater than what you could ever imagine. Yes. But your story isn't over. God isn't done with you yet.
Bring it, Jurie.
Thank you, God. Thank you, Lord, that you are not done with us yet. And even when we find ourselves at these tax offices, you're not done. I want to encourage you, if you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube and you would like us to pray with you about something, or you just want to respond and say, you know what, God isn't done with me yet. Can I encourage you to just put a chat on there, just put a note on there, just tell us that you're out there. We want to pray with you. We want to trust God that many people that are finding themselves at this tax desk will get up today and say, there is no one like Jesus. There's no one like Him who have called me into this moment and in this time. Lord, I pray for a resurrection of thoughts. I pray for a resurrection of dreams. Lord, I pray that many people that find themselves in a place where they've fallen back, where they've given up, Lord, may this be the day. I even feel like there's somebody on this call that said, my life is worthless and my life is over. I want to tell you, God is not done with you yet. God is not done with you yet. This isn't over. He's ready to pick you up. He's ready to take care of you. You have not done something which is so bad that God cannot bring you back from it. Hear Him today as he comes up to your tax desk and invites you to follow him. Because I want to tell you, there's no one, there is nothing that'll take care of you like Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Amen.